Ryan Boldt of the Deep Dark Woods really made me feel something. There was a moment in our conversation when he told me he listens to music all of the time, and he is always looking for a song to make him feel something. I've always cared more about the way a song can break my heart than the perfection or the execution of the notes. And to borrow from an overused term, I felt seen when I heard him say that. And isn't that what human connection is really all about? You go about your day and then you sit down to get to know someone, and in a moment, a word, you and him are the same. I had all kinds of paths already carved out to supposedly achieve this common ground. Our bands started at the same time, shared the same stages. We grew up in the same part of the country. I was friends with his cousin. But it was the thing he confessed that really makes him Ryan, that connected with the thing that really makes me Glenn, that cut through. And isn't that the gift of what an artist does? Not surprisingly, for 20 years now, to connect with who we really are. The Deep Dark Woods have produced 7 full-length albums and an imminent 8th, garnered local and international awards, and toured the world while managing the unpredictable shifts of lineup changes, relocation, various label deals, and a pandemic. They are easily described as a traditional folk roots band, but those singular labels fall shorter than usual, and you'll find yourself wanting to add some version of blues and country and more, with modern nods to quiet storytelling artists of your preference. And then you'll realize you left out the crucial nods to past greats like the band or the Grateful Dead. My name is Glenn Erickson. This is Almost Famous Enough. Thank you for spending your time with us. This is the Deep Dark Woods. Thanks for joining me. Anyhow, Ryan Boldt, the Deep Dark Woods. Appreciate this. You are in southern Ontario. I always knew you from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, the middle of the prairies. So since your band and sound has always sat in the pocket of Americana, we might as well do a little Canadiana. And where in southern Ontario are you sitting right now?
I'm in London, Ontario now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Right in the city. Great
Yeah.
little city. Do they still have the folk club there?
No, unfortunately, that closed.
Oh, that's too bad.
They haven't. They have. There was like that tiny. What was it called? The London Music Hall or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
That one's gone, but they have a little place called Chaucer's Pub, and they put on
Okay.
folk shows there.
Okay,
But
cool.
lots of good people come, like Eric Anderson
Yeah.
and those kind of guys. So yeah, it's
Nice.
good.
Yeah, I remember playing in the basement of the London Music
Yes.
Hall little club there a couple of times and tapping on the 3 people I knew in London to try come out
Right.
every single
Right.
time and bring their friends. But great people. They were very hospitable. So you're in London, Ontario. You've been there how long? How long have you been there since you made that move out east?
Well, I moved out here to be with my wife. That was 2017, I believe. And then we moved away to Nova Scotia during COVID and
Okay.
stayed there for 3 years or so, and have been back now for just over a full year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you famously, of course, started out in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, and I guess part of my curiosity is, was it like actual Saskatoon, or was it Saskatoon adjacent, or did I just seem to, I grew up in Regina, Saskatchewan. I seem to
Okay.
always feel like a lot of people, maybe they lived in Warman, or they were in
Right.
Dalmany, or some version, that they kind of just trickled in their 20s through their college years. And whether that was you or your band members, was it all Saskatoon proper or
I was
otherwise?
Saskatoon. I grew up there, and
Okay.
but we spent a lot of time up at Christopher Lake, which is
Mm.
just north of Prince Albert, and
Yeah. Lake
that's
country for sure.
yeah. So that's where I met my band at the time, Chris Mason and Bert Barlow. I knew
Yeah.
them from going to camp and all that. And so
That's awesome.
I was living in Prince Albert for the summer we started the band. And
Okay, so how old were you when you guys started? 2005, Deep Dark Woods
yeah,
comes together.
I was 22 22. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty classic age to start a
Yeah.
band with your friends, right?
Yeah.
So you have a new single, Ryan, and I want to for sure talk about it and sort of find out where you are right now, obviously where you're headed. I also just really love to back all the way up and tell some of the story all the way up to where we are right now and sort of I don't know. I want to get a better picture of sort of who you are and what that arc has looked like in your
Yeah.
career. And I think whatever the pieces are that kind of stand out that shaped that for you. So if we start back there at 2005, you said 22 years old, a group of friends you started going to camp in Lake Country, Saskatchewan with. I guess my very first question, obviously, you know, you're renowned for your very traditional sound. I mean, right out of the gate, you know, traditional music, traditional roots, and all the sort of parallels that were sort of being thrown your way. And I think what was obviously interesting at the time was I think people found it interesting when young men kind of put on old clothes, right? So, you
Yeah.
know, you guys come out like a fully formed, very like folk driven band that, you know, sounds like they moved from the backyard fire pit right to a stage very seamlessly, very affable. So what was the thing that you guys formed around? Was that driven by your interest in songwriting, or did these group of guys all have this same unique interest in traditional music and
Uh,
sounds for their age?
no, that was like I started maybe playing traditional songs in my parents' basement in my bedroom when I was, 17, 18. I was playing, old Irish and American songs and singing Neil Young and Bob Dylan, stuff like that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then probably around 19 is when I first started writing songs. They weren't very good songs, but I started writing, and that was when I was living in BC. With right after high school, I started writing. I knew what I
Mm.
wanted to do, and then I moved back to Saskatchewan to form the band. But those guys were kind of into more like Radiohead and all that sort of stuff, and I kind of turned them on to Bob Dylan and
Yeah.
folk
Yep.
music.
Well, I mean that there's a lot of parallels. So you and I have met before a few times. I
Yeah,
played in the band The Wheat Pool.
that's right.
So we had a whole bunch of intersections around, I think, the time from about 2007 to 11 or 12. And I remember, I think that's really interesting, parallel in a sense that I came into that band and there are two brothers who really wanted to explore their roots of their love of Neil Young, Gordon Lightfoot, all that kind of
Right,
songwriting.
right.
And I came from that indie rock Radiohead world, but I had this side door of I think Wilco was where we sort of first crossed, and then I just kept getting sucked in deeper and deeper to a lot of Canadiana that I and Americana stuff that I probably wished I had heard sooner. So that's
Right.
that's that's an interesting start out. So you guys start playing this music, you bring it out. Obviously you're getting some momentum is building up. In other words, probably in the typical band way of somebody hears you play, they like what they hear, they book you for some shows, the response
Yeah.
goes well, you keep getting booked for shows, and that snowball kind of begins. So from my outside perspective, right, like you have your first record in 2007 and then 2009, 2011, sort of this steady typical 2 year album.
Mhm.
Did that feel like a straight line of a snowball rolling down a hill, building right from kind of 2005 out of the gate to then?
Yeah, definitely. We started. I think we played our first show at Amigos in 2005, and then from
Saskatoon, yeah, famous
Saskatoon.
pub,
Yeah,
yeah,
and then from there we started playing more shows. We play every month or so, and the word got out, and the shows started selling out, and then we started traveling a little bit, going to
yeah,
Regina and Prince Albert, and then making our way to Edmonton and Calgary, and eventually in 2007 we went out to Vancouver, and that's where we met Steve Dawson from
mm-hmm.
Black Hen Records. He came to the show and loved it and wanted to
Yeah,
record us. So we had our "Hang Me, Oh Hang Me" record out at that point, and he loved it. And I believe that one was on. Yeah, it was on Black Hand. So after we recorded that, he wanted to release it, and so
Okay, so he
yeah,
picked that up, and then you recorded the next record with
with
him
him,
as well,
yeah,
right? So
yeah,
that's the Winter Hours record. So
yeah,
I remember distinctly meeting you guys, I think, and seeing you at the Moose Jaw Breakout West, or it was just called the Western and
right,
Canadian Music Awards, I think, back then
yeah,
in Moose Jaw. And we didn't even have a record out then. I remember begging a guy from Calgary who was kind of right in the middle of the scene, this great guy named Laurie Matheson.
hmm,
He had a show booked with you guys. I begged him to put us on the bill. And
okay,
he did. What a sweetheart. So he came down and played that show. I remember that. And I remember there was, again, the same festival, Western Canadian Music Awards in Edmonton. Maybe it was the next year or the year after. We had an album out by that point. And this is going to be a funny story for you. And I should preface it to say, I have no jealousy or whatever about the Deep Dark Woods or band. This might sound like it when I tell you this story. So it's this venue called the Artery in Edmonton, Alberta, and
yeah,
the festival's going on, and you guys were booked, and the place was packed, and it was hopping. Of course, I did a lot of the business in our band, so I did the due diligence I did the cringy stuff, like finding out who the agents and who all the gatekeeper people were that were there for the festival. And of course, we had the very typical aspirations of South by Southwest very early, probably too early. I found out who the guy was. He was at that show watching you guys. I remember standing beside him and striking up a conversation while you guys were playing. This is so funny to me now. And for whatever cavalier off the cuff reason, I was like, these guys are amazing, right? And he's like, yeah. I was like, you should totally book them for South by, man. Anyhow, he did book you guys for South by that year, and he didn't book us, and was specifically told he was only picking one band out of that whole sort of genre and space of alt country. So the guys in the band, I don't know if they were super happy that not that he booked you on my recommendation, but
right,
it was just a funny, ironic moment to me. So, but I was a fan right off the bat from that point, and I can remember specifically you guys playing "Hang Me, Oh Hang Me," and that bop to that song always got everybody up in the room, which was fantastic. And I think our favorite thing always about your band was your bassist Chris, who had this fantastic sort of up down bop while he started playing. He would just get lost in the groove,
right,
and it was so fun to watch. Great guy. So yeah, my first introduction is that album and that song, which was independent. And then, like you said, you connected with Steve Dawson, who at that time Black Hen was really quickly evolving. I think the Canadian music scene, CBC Radio 3 is a big part of it. A lot of Black Hen songs, and Steve seemed like a perfect fit. And
hmm,
you make the second record, and then you sort of move into the third record, Place I Left Behind, and then that move goes to Six Shooter. So I'm curious what's happening in that sort of 5-year span of you're getting a lot of shows, you're getting offers, you're being asked to go to South by, now you're in talks with Six Shooter. Did that feel fast? How was that happening, unraveling for a
yeah.
very sort of traditional band like you guys?
Yeah, it felt very, very fast. It just seemed like there was good news all the time at that
Mm.
point. I remember I was on some message board from, I think it was like a Bob Dylan message board for years at that point. I'm obsessed with Bob Dylan. And I posted a video of my band, and somebody that worked for Sugar Hill Records really liked it and sent me a message, and we got to talking. And I told him we were coming down to, I think it was Nashville or somewhere. He came and watched us, and from that point, we signed with Sugar Hill down in like the whole world, and then Six Shooter in Canada.
Yeah.
And around that time, we got with a new manager, an American manager from Atlanta, Tim Sweetley. He now puts on like Shaky Knees Festival and all
Mm.
those sorts of massive festivals. And because of him, a lot of the stuff happened. We were nominated for Americana Awards. And we were really
Yeah.
going up in the U.S., playing mostly in the U.S., and then the odd tours in Canada. Yeah, so it was
So
it was very quick, all of it.
So I think so. Part of the reason I like to have these conversations on this podcast is to authentically pull veil back a little bit on what careers in music actually look like. and what's actually happening. I think everybody has that aspiration of we were able to kick the snowball down the hill and it just kept going. And like you said, like everything we heard was good news for a long time, which is a very interesting way to put it. I think one of the ways most young bands that I've watched aren't prepared for that snowball to happen, especially if it feels fast, is you tend to just all, when you're young, you just don't have a lot of other skills, such as like trying to figure out how the money flows when all this stuff, and you're paying someone else is on the payroll. Now you have a manager, now you have an agent, now you have different people that are on the payroll, so to speak. And yes, you're getting the opportunities. I'm curious, at that time in your experience, was that a challenge? Did that feel messy? Did you feel like you got lucky and landed with the right people to help with it? How did that side of the business unravel for you?
Yeah, we got very lucky. Also, Chris Mason and Lucas Getz, the drummer at the time, were very good at money stuff.
Good
Me
at the
pers
business side. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not very good. I'm not very good at that sort of thing. I was focused on writing songs and
Yeah.
playing shows, and but we did have an amazing manager who hooked us up with a great business manager. We had an amazing lawyer, all American guys that really helped us
Hmm.
with all that. That so much that we didn't really have to worry at that point. And like I said, everything was at that point, the like early mid 2010, like the 2010s. This kind of music was really popular.
Yeah.
So we got in just at the perfect time for people to care. It doesn't seem like people care as much about folk music or folk rock music as much as they used to. But yeah, because of that, that helped. And yeah, and then having Tim, our manager, he pushed things to the next level, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, do you feel that observation about the perception of maybe how the public cares about folk or versions of traditional music? I mean, there was an interesting blend back then, right? Because there's such still, I mean, there still is, to wonder, however people think, a divide between popular or mainstream and the industry that goes with it versus what we would call indie, because it doesn't have the corporate machine behind it. And I felt like indie, there was, it has always adopted and overlapped and blended a lot of things because it's generally fueled by an audience that is more accepting, right? They're just not looking for the cookie cutter
Mm-hmm.
mainstream version of music. So yeah, I feel like they were really embracing that sort of either most traditional, like our band was like surging through the alt country appetite of that time, kind of on the heels of a lot of those bands of Ryan Adams and Whiskey Town and but
Right.
but you guys had a whole different range of things you're overlapping with, and I can see why it'd be really popular in the States since they
Yeah.
have a deeper depth of traditional music and how blues and country and bluegrass and folk all overlap. And so do you feel like the observation that it's changed from 2009 to now 2025, is that just an effect of the subgenre not feeling as strong or promoted, or do you think any other shift has happened?
Well, I think musical tastes are constantly changing. Right now, it's not a cool thing for younger people. I mean, there is like a little bit of a kind of folky sort of thing going on, but it's like, I don't know how to properly explain the type. Like, there's like Jessica Pratt and that kind of
Yeah.
stuff, White Fence, like more of the psychedelic kind of folk rock stuff.
Mm.
And that's kind of what I'm sort of doing right now in a certain way, but it's definitely a lot more traditional than that music. So I don't
The
know.
folk
It's
music festival circuits still seem pretty strong. Do you feel like you see a probably much wider range and lens of that than I do? Does that feel like that area has stayed pretty healthy?
I mean, it's definitely healthy, but even the folk festivals have changed. Like the musical styles have changed at those. It's hard to
Yeah.
find a folk artist at the folk festivals now.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's funny, like I'm here in Edmonton and our folk festival, which has sort of maintained its size and health, but it's maintained its tradition to the criticism of a lot of people around here, right? Who they continue to book pretty traditional artists, folk artists, as the heart and soul and the bulk, and even mostly in the headlining sphere. Compared to like our neighbors down the road in Calgary, who are sort of, I think, a more example of the more modern folk fest right now, who tend to step further outside of those more traditional circles with theirs. So, but I hear all the time about, one crowd would love it if they would get a little less traditional, and other people are like
Right.
wanting to fiercely protect that tradition and that history. So,
Yeah,
um,
I think it's important to change, but you got to know your roots.
yeah,
Maintain that a little bit, but I mean, obviously, you got to go with what people are going to buy.
yeah. Well,
If they're booking, people like Ramblin' Jack, that's not going to bring in young kids. It'd bring me in,
yeah.
but you know,
Yeah, I mean, it was funny. Like here, they were booking like Old Crow Medicine Show. Like that felt like its own subgenre of the kind of thing that they do. And I don't know, I had the wrong perception. They ended up on the main stage in the afternoon and had the entire hill here in Edmonton just bopping. And
mhm.
I was wrong. I'm like, look at these guys still have such an incredible reach and impact. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah,
When I spend a little time Googling you, Ryan, I saw the same term a few times from early press, calling you an old soul, which I think is kind of, in one hand, someone could probably easily say that just based on your music without actually meeting you, which maybe is a typical unfair thing that a person in the press might do, make a bunch of assumptions about you, who you are, just because of the way you express yourself through your songwriting and your
right.
music. But I'm curious how you feel, especially in what you were just talking about, because you said you just kind of threw in the phrase what the kids might want or are listening. So, 2005, you're sitting at a 20-year lifespan under the moniker of Deep Dark Woods now. When you were young, like I use the expression, young kids wearing old clothes, like when you play traditional music, is maybe a bit of a, not a spectacle, but it's a thing to sort of turn heads a little bit. Like that's a little bit different. Everyone needs a differentiator. But when you're not an old soul anymore, because now you're an older guy,
Yes.
uh, what is that? What does that feel like for you personally?
Um, it kind of just happens so fast. I'm sure you have children and
Yeah,
how fast it goes. Like I still feel like it's 2012.
yeah,
It's so fast. So I haven't really thought about anything. I just go about writing and playing, and I don't really look back at anything.
mm,
I find if I look back, some things might be a little sad or something, or yeah, I don't really think about anything like that.
I think that sounds healthy. It
Yeah,
sounds very healthy approach.
I try
Absolutely.
to move forward with the way I write songs, and
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great. Like I said, I think that's fantastic. I think this way, and I don't know how you've felt about how people try to hang, genres and stuff like that on bands or on you personally, in your background, like using terms, everything from like murder balladier or any of that sort of stuff. Like I think what I've always found interesting is how effortless it seemed for you to just sort of live. Like it's like you'd never felt like you've had to mess with the formula
yeah.
all the way along. And I don't know if that is like true for you, or whether you felt like you've ever had to wrestle with originality or there, or if that's another thing that you just never thought about.
No, I never thought about it. I listen to music constantly. That's all I do.
Mm,
Is music is always on. I'm always trying to find stuff that will make me feel something,
mm,
I'm all every day. I listen to music every waking moment. There's always a record on in the house. I'm obsessed with trying to find stuff that will give me some sort of spark to help me write my own songs.
yeah.
So I like getting back to what you said about people, kind of putting a label on you. I do find it kind of unfortunate because I think a lot of people are influenced by what the press will say
Yeah.
what kind of music you are. And I think that's kind of maybe had an effect on not getting to certain types of musical fans because I yes, the music that I play now is has elements of my younger days, but I've grown so much and learnt different techniques of writing
Mm.
and lyricism that I didn't have when I was 25 years old. And I think when somebody is writing about you, it can have an effect on who listens.
Yeah, because they're struggling so hard to create some box of translation to a
Yeah,
crowd, but
yeah,
then by unintended or intended consequences, they've now put you in a box that
yeah.
you didn't necessarily choose to be in, and you feel like you would love to have a wider potential reach
Yes, yeah,
than the people who are carrying that translation across for you every time. I mean, I know when I listen to your music, like you were talking about, you have elements from before, like distinctly to me, like the first three records have, a very similar feel, and
mhm,
the whole shape of it, I guess, is what I would say. But then you have a song, Up on the Mountain. I always say it wrong, so I wanted to say it right. But on the Euro record, right, which is I think your fourth full length record, and that's where I see a shift start. I'm curious if that is where you felt a shift start. Like that song to me feels like it's poached from a lost Neil Young catalog so distinctly, and it feels like you sort of having an identity, stepping even out further from the sound of the band on the first three. Does that line up with what was happening for you personally and for the band?
yeah, definitely. I that record that was after it was basically a new band on the Euro record. Jeff came in shortly after Winter Hours. We met
Jeff's
him at
amazing, by the way. I
yeah,
like
he's
the last show we ever played with you was at the Ironwood in Calgary.
right.
That's the first we had seen Jeff play with you, and it felt like you had gotten a ringer. You know what I mean? Like you just got Gretzky and Messier on the same
I
team, and
know.
it
Yeah.
wasn't fair to the rest of us or something. But I also remember that show because I think he was really good at haggling because the promoter was like maybe not was gypping you on some
Ah.
money or something,
Oh, I
and I was like,
yes.
hey, that guy's a rock star. He knows how to also haggle with,
Yes.
and it's not the
I
promoter; it's
remember
whoever
that
he
very
has
well.
doing the showrunner. And the sad part of it is that the owner of the Ironwood, who's an absolute gem of a guy, but he usually had too much to drink by the end of the night to
Right.
step in
Right.
and help out. But he was a beautiful man. So yeah, so that was. But he's a ringer. So I cut you off there. Sorry, but
Yeah.
he's a great talent, and
Yeah,
he's still with you now.
he's
Yeah.
still it's been an up and down adventure for the last 20 years
Where's he
with
located? Is it a
he's
geography thing too?
he's in Banff. Yeah, I think we put out Place I Left Behind, and then we did Jubilee with Jonathan Wilson producing. And then at that point, we'd been touring for just constantly touring. We had no breaks at all, and we were all
Mm-hmm.
kind of going crazy. And the band was just dying because of the
Yeah.
exhaustion. And we were playing 150 shows a year or something. It was crazy.
Is that what contributed to the changeover? I
Yeah,
mean, there's a couple
that's
things that happen. There's that. There's the pressure of what the next level is.
yeah,
Sometimes you find that, some guy has to figure out that his aspirations when he was 22 aren't the same when he's
yeah,
27 or 29.
yeah. We'd added Clayton Linthicum from Casey and Clayton on electric guitar for the Jubilee album. Burke had quit shortly before that. And then the touring, the constant touring in 2013, 2014 during that record just wore everybody out. Lucas, the drummer, just had enough and quit. I just wanted to keep going. I couldn't stop. I mean, I dedicated whatever nearly 10 years of my life at that point
Yeah.
to to playing. I never went to school, college, or anything. I knew right from I was 16 that I wanted to play in a rock and roll band. So I didn't want to stop. And we ended up going on hiatus for 2 years. But during that point, I recorded the Yarrow album with what is my new band now. Well, parts
Yeah.
of it anyway. And then I just kept going. And yeah, 2017 that was put out,
Yeah.
and it's just kind of been an evolving band. Jeff and I and Mike Silverman. I know you probably know Mike.
Yeah. Yeah.
On drums that's been the core band for almost 10 years now, almost as long as the other band.
So from that point, that's when we start seeing like only you on the record covers of your singles and different
Right.
things. So is that in part because not just because you're the original member, or you just are, like, I think maybe people don't always understand how these distinctions get made on the business side, right? Like,
Right.
you can have a band agreement with your original guys, your actual contract, and if they leave, then, or people might be surprised sometimes that they think a band is a band, but actually only two members are, the signed legal kind of right holders of the quote unquote business entity that is a band. So that transition, we start only seeing you on the covers of things and in interviews and stuff. So how has that transition, I guess, been? Is it really just been on your shoulders, and then you pull those guys together when it's time to record? Or
Yeah, I mean, I front all the money, I do all of that, so it's my band, but I consider Jeff and Mike parts of this band.
yeah.
Every now and again, I'll have to play a show without Jeff or Mike, and it feels very weird.
Well, I mean,
But
Jeff is the longest serving guy you've played with now. So
he's been in it since 2000 and probably late 2008, I think, or 2009, early 2009. It's been a really long time with him.
Yeah.
But I mean, also the geography of things.
Yeah.
Me being out in Ontario and Jeff and Mike being in Alberta makes for a difficult. We can't all get together and take photos. So, but like we need the photo right now. So we have to just do.
That's I love that you said that, actually, because it's so funny to me that you can make a whole bunch of assumptions just off of like it's just you in the photo now, which means it's really anyhow, but it's really just a geographical restriction.
Yeah, I mean,
I've
been trying.
I think that's great.
I've been trying to get pictures with the three of us, and it's really almost impossible. If I had more money, I'd fly them out to do it, but
it's like you need to buy this big backdrop and then take your picture, mail it to the next guy, and and then get a graphic artist to stitch you together as if you're all on the same backdrop or something. I really wanted.
We are going on tour in 2 weeks, so I'm hoping that we can snap a few pictures for that time.
No doubt. Got to multitask, get all the things in when you're together.
Yeah.
I did want to ask you, because we were talking about the Yarrow album, the inspiration for the title and where it came from.
As you know, I love old folk lore and folk songs, and there's always, they always sing about the Yarrow in folk songs and traditional songs. And one day I was in Victoria and I saw a building downtown that said Yarrow on it, and I was like, let's go ahead and use that.
That's great.
Yeah.
I was curious because I spent a year of my life in a town called Yarrow, BC, between Chilliwack and Abbotsford, closer to Chilliwack, just like a little off the highway. When you're on the highway between Chilliwack and Abbotsford in the lower mainland of BC. And I was like, I'd never heard that name surface anywhere much before.
It's a beautiful word. I love pretty sounding words like that. I'm always looking for, when I'm writing, I'm looking for pretty sounding words, to add into my songs.
So about this stage, like you said, you had moved out to Ontario to be with your now wife. You'd been going super hard because of all the opportunities for the band, enough so that it's burning out some people, but just kind of driving you forward. So you're in your 30s by this point, right? Mm-hmm. And so, the personal side of your life, right, of trying to keep this career together, which I'm sure feels like it's on a shoestring so often of
Yeah.
the time.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But like you said, I just got to keep moving. I just got to keep moving because you don't want to stop or you fear everything stops, right? But
Yes.
one of the biggest complicating factors to that, I think, for a lot of people is like their personal life. Like, do I fall in love? Can I fall in love? What if I meet a person who's not into this life or geographically somewhere else? So, how did that happen for you, meeting somebody? And was that somebody you had already known and been dating or
Well,
being with for a long time? Or how did that kind
I
of
I
happen?
knew I knew her because she was a musician as well, Jenny Burkle, and so she played festivals and that we were part of, and we got to know each other. And she just understands the world of touring, and
Yeah.
I think I've been in other relationships while I was in the band earlier, and we were on tour constantly, and it's hard to make it work.
Yeah. It's a
But
hard
if
life.
Yeah, but if I mean, she knows what touring is. He's all for it.
Yeah. So
It
you've made the
is
move
hard,
out.
it is
It's
hard,
very.
especially having a child is
I
hard to
was going to
deal with.
ask that question. I mean, it's hard even when they understand that it's hard, right?
Yeah,
That doesn't take away from how hard it can be. And
yeah,
then you've had children together. I was going to ask about that. I've told this story on my podcast already because I had Grant Lawrence on early. And one of the earliest funny things to me in my conversation with Grant, because I joined the band when I was 35 years old and always felt like things might have been different if we had just started 5 years earlier. But I was
right,
35 and I had a kid already, and the second was on its way. And Grant always, at that time, this is like, 2007 era, and he was always extremely curious about why I was doing that or if I thought like how that it seemed unheard of for him to start this trajectory so late. And so I've lived through the challenges of what that looks
hmm
like. So I'm curious, like, so you had kids, you went through a phase here of like a move and that relationship and keeping things going and having kids, and that probably slammed right into the pandemic like one like constant
well,
string.
my kid's only two, so I had
Oh, I thought you had it. I thought you had it sooner before
no.
pandemic. Okay.
We had the kid when we were in Nova Scotia,
Okay.
and I was 40 at that point. So
Yeah,
um,
that's a hell of a choice, man.
I know
where
I'm
where do you have the energy to
I
run a music career and a 2 year old
it's
in your 40s?
insanity. It is completely insanity.
I
And now
said
I
just the other
understand.
day, yeah,
Well, now I understand why people have kids at like 22
when
years
they're
old.
young,
Yeah,
100%.
it
I could
is.
never imagine it now.
Oh, it's insane. I'm so tired all the time, constantly.
Yeah, I believe it. I mean, so Nova Scotia, it's funny. So you, in a sense, you sort of prefaced it first in the way of like we went there to ride out the pandemic, probably with a support system of people, right,
Mhm.
and whatnot. So there were a couple things I was gonna also want to ask you about really quick while we kind of move through your timeline. I mean, one of them is sort of you're well, you touched on already a bit, Ryan, about having you got lucky in different people that came in and the relationships you've had. I'm wondering about your experiences where some, and we touched on this too a little bit with the band, but the challenging ones. I'm curious, like, was one like Steve Dawson is a gem, and what he was doing at the time, like I said, felt like very significant in the Canadiana music scene, and he was finding and embracing and giving a platform because he was doing more than just producing. He'd put you on the label. He would do tons of promotion. They always seemed to have a showcase at all of the festivals and the Canadian Music Weeks and North by Northeast and things. So that quick turnaround to then meeting the guys from Sugar Hill and Six Shooter, who can obviously give you a much bigger stage and access. Is that an easy thing to navigate with Steve? Is he really endorsing and supporting it, or is it
Oh yeah,
challenging when a
yeah,
guy kind of invests in you, but then you have new opportunities show up?
yeah. I mean, he was always super supportive, and still is. I talk to him every now and again. There was no hard feelings at all. He knew that we were going up and needed something more at that
Yeah.
point. And I mean, Sugar Hill was great. We put out two records with him. But I think the second one we put out with them was a little too weird for them, and then they dropped us.
Oh no. Which one? Which one was that?
It was Jubilee.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, and to be honest, like the Jubilee record, I think there's some really good stuff on there, but it's way too long. Jonathan Wilson's an amazing producer. One thing I could say is that I wish he would have just like reined it in a little and told us to shorten the songs. I mean, we were at that point. We were doing a lot of Grateful Dead sort of. We were playing with the guys from the Grateful Dead and all that sort of stuff.
Wow,
and it was,
that's
so
funny.
we were trying to put it on the record, but I just don't think it works
Yeah.
now. And the thing is, there was five of us in there trying to get everybody say all mashed together with the
Yeah.
producer, and it just doesn't work. You need one or two people to do it. You can't have that many people.
Smaller committee for sure.
Yeah.
The parallel I understand is actually a guy from the same backyard. So I worked with Andy Schaff in his very early days. I had heard him on what was the website everybody got on with their music in, like
MySpace?
Yeah, I don't know. The name just, now I'm showing my age. So I found Andy on MySpace, and then I had formed an indie label and actually had put out his first Darker Days record on it. And of course he was on this snowball trajectory that was taking off and starting to get noticed. And then he had an opportunity to sign with a label in the States that was connected to Hopeless, a punk label. So all that reached. So I helped navigate that too for him, and same thing was for him in a transition of, he needed those bigger opportunities because it was just happening so fast and I wasn't ever going to be able to keep up. But he was also in the same space at the time, which is interesting, which is like he was at that moment. I remember when we were negotiating that deal, wanted to put out like a double record. He was writing prolifically. He had so many songs. He wanted to just put them all out. And people like me were saying, all your songs aren't equal. There's a reason people choose some of them. But yeah, it's hard when you have a lot of different voices telling you different things, and things are happening fast, right?
Yeah, and when you're 25 years old, it's different than, a 25-year-old in the 1960s. Your 30s is equivalent to being in your 20s.
Yeah, I get you.
So I've become a much better producer now. I know what I want. I'm not afraid to say it. Now I want the record to be a half an hour to 40 minutes tops. I think that's what most people want to listen to. They get tired of 75-minute records. Like the early 2000s and the 90s when the CD came in, and people just put out these massively long albums. They would just because
the format afforded it.
Yeah, you could make it 80 minutes if you wanted, and it just.
And now we don't really have a format trying to dictate it for us anymore. And now you see people just pushing singles all the time, and the long form is well, that kind of pushes us up talking about what you're doing right now and writing right now, and this new single Ruby that you have out. Which I guess the first thing I'd ask is this, because I didn't see it in your pressers. Is Ruby part of a record? Like this is the tease to the new record kind of idea?
Yeah, we went out to BC in July, I believe, and made a record out there. It was me, Jeff, Mike, and Evan Cheadle, who's played on the last couple records. Evan's one of the greatest guitar players I've ever met. There's only two guitar players that I feel can play what I want, and that's Evan and Clayton.
That's an important characteristic.
It is. And if I can't have those guys, then I don't have a guitar player. I just do it by myself. I don't know who else can play like that. They have like a tone that's it's like a mixture of Robbie Robertson and Richard Thompson. British, very British sounding, but also that nice Canadian American.
Yeah, tone is everything almost before.
Yeah, it is.
Before it chops, right?
Yeah, and when I first got Evan into the band, which was 2017, he'd never played electric guitar in a band, but
Wow.
I heard him playing at a tiny little club in Victoria, and I knew he was amazing. I could see it. Yeah.
Yeah. So this song Ruby, which I think by the way is so good, man. Like there's something about this song. The first half a line when you come out, there's this like pillowy, soft, lilting higher end of your register, which is a particular tone I think for a baritone singer, right? And maybe the reason it grabbed me is like I've followed a couple people in Canada really close that I feel you are in the same pocket with in your voice, like Dan Mangan and Hayden, who both started with they start in a different way. They started with really leaning into a heavy baritone version of
Right.
their music over acoustic based music still, versus the traditional side, and they've had to change that over the years. I think probably mostly because it wasn't sustainable what they were doing to their voice, and they've leaned into this sort of higher part, but I feel like it has a very distinct tone when it comes from a baritone voice. And then if I hadn't known any better, that first half a line I could have interchanged either of those guys. It seems like such a perfect delivery. Is this I guess I'm always curious right off the bat, is this a conscious choice? Are you trying to sing a bit of a different delivery? Are you exploring a different space vocally for yourself?
Yeah.
Does it have anything to do with age and experience and time on the road and what that does for your voice?
Yeah. Definitely a lot of different things. When I was on the road constantly before COVID, my voice was, you're using it all the time, constantly
Yeah.
touring. And so my voice was quite low, and it was hard to hit the higher notes because it was, I think, worn out. I
Mhm.
never do any sort of warm ups. I probably should, but I think the older I'm getting, for some reason, my voice is becoming higher. But yeah, I it feels really good. I remember when I first started, I would sing in a higher key, and then a girlfriend of mine told me I was singing too high, and then it kind of made me think. This was when I was young, and it made me think, okay, I'm singing too high, and then I started singing lower, and it was just in the last couple of years where I'm like, man, it feels really good to sing very high like this. So
Well, it's funny what the influence others will say is. Like, I
I
remember
know.
hearing Bon Iver had his bands for years and he sang at a lower regular. And then he showed up singing some classic song in that falsetto, and all of his buddies were like, you should keep singing like that. And now he trademarked it essentially, right? That
Right.
particular tone. But tell me a bit about the song. I guess the first thing I have to say, and I started saying this before I just was specific about your vocal tone, was it definitely does feel to me like the most realized, like mature version of Ryan Boldt that I've heard. Like if anything feels like this is exactly a guy in his skin, it feels like that for sure. But then I read your specific, just quick little presser about the subject matter, what you were going through when you wrote this song, balancing loss of someone that you loved that was close to you who had died with the expectation of a child coming, which is the most incredible, unrelatable to anything else experience of
Mhm.
excitement. Let me put it this way. I find one of the most interesting human characteristics is cognitive dissonance, about keeping two seemingly opposing ideas and yet we can carry them with us, right? Like, and in this instance, like, how do we laugh, or how do we feel about making a joke when we're surrounded by a world that seems like it's falling apart, or this tragedy has happened and extreme joy has happened, and most people don't process it, I guess is where I'm getting to, but songwriters process it, and it seems
Mhm.
like you tried to process it in this song. I'm just really curious what that experience was like for you, trying to bring that out of yourself and put it into a song like that.
Well, I think when I write songs, I don't ever write songs when I don't feel like when I don't have that feeling inside of me. And I think that happening with Kiko dying, he was my tour manager over in the UK for 10 years. We were
Mm.
very good friends. I'd go visit him when I wasn't on the road, and he was coming to visit my daughter when she was born. Him and his dad were gonna they had the trip planned. It was gonna be his dad's. His dad's old now. It was gonna be his dad's last trip abroad, and so they planned all this out, and then just died in his sleep. He had a hernia,
Wow.
and he got an operation and didn't wake up the next day. And I was out at a cabin with my wife. It was like 1 month before our daughter was born, and so yeah, it was quite a thing to go through.
Yeah.
You don't really get to process the death when you're. It really took me quite some time I mean, not to actually process his death. It was, finally, after a year, that's kind of when I was able to settle down from having a child and really understand what had happened, that I'd never see him again. I had all my gear. We had gear together in his house. And, so, yeah, it was a crazy, crazy time. And I went on tour and he wasn't there. He was always there with me on tour, whether it was solo or with the band. He was the driver. And then I went on a solo tour and I had to go to his house and pick up my stuff. And it was crazy, just seeing his shoes sitting there and his laptop that he's always brought on the road. So, I mean, that really, but I wrote it between the two things happening. So I didn't actually process what had happened until a year later, but I think the writing of the song maybe helped a little bit with that. But I don't really think about writing. It's just a thing that happens. I'll sit down with if I have this kind of, I don't know, it's a weird feeling, I guess songwriters have, where you just
for sure, you have to get it out.
Feel it. Yeah. You can feel there's something bubbling a little bit, and you have to sit down and you have to do it quickly, or else that feeling can leave as quickly as it came.
Yeah, and it's such a scary feeling to feel like it might be gone.
I know.
So you have to catch it.
Yeah. I know.
It definitely
terrible thing.
It definitely felt like, because a lot of your songs, they feel very attached to, because you've done these ballad volumes and a lot of public domain songs that feel very in the pocket with a good part of your catalog with the Deep Dark Woods, where you're doing very traditional folk storytelling, I feel, which becomes a little more distinct when the more personal version of you comes into a song. And Ruby feels very personal compared to a lot of your catalog. Is that an accurate interpretation of it?
Yeah. I think my earlier songs, a lot of them were story songs. Tradition of telling a story of somebody else around the last record, Changing Faces.
Yeah. Is that what we can expect on the rest of the record? Is it definitely follow suit with this one?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's a mixture of things. It's
Awesome. So I don't have a date. Do you have a date? When is the full album?
It'll be out in the fall. I'm not sure the date yet. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And you have, like you said, you're heading out on the road in a couple of weeks only, and you got like a series of shows I saw, and then you are hopping the pond and you're doing some UK shows attached to some festivals that are kind of happen around this time normally.
Yeah. I went last year to the UK, and I love playing over there. The crowds there's just a folk music scene. More than there is here. So it's really nice.
Well, Ryan, most of all, I just want you to know, I think it's like 20 years and you're still going despite being exhausted with a 2-year-old in your 40s. Yeah. All of that is amazing. I have so much respect for the people who have kept it going, and being able to hear from you personally how, you just expressed it, you couldn't help it. I think that I just have this drive to keep going. You've always had this drive. This is what you knew from 16. Yeah, like we all know how challenging it is to feel like how easy the ball can stop rolling in this business, but that you keep pushing it and kicking it along, I think is fantastic.
Yeah, I feel like I'm a little too old to stop now. I did 20 years of this, and I got nothing else to do, so I don't know what to
Well,
do.
yeah, well, you don't have to ask that question, but because like you do it very well. I think I'm excited about the new record because, like I said, I'm extremely charmed by your new song, Ruby. I love it. I'm really glad to hear it. I wish you all the best with it, and I appreciate your time joining me. I did forget. I was going to ask you a question at the start, and I forget. I have to ask it
Yeah.
before I say bye. But your last name is Boldt. You're from Saskatoon. I knew a whole bunch of Boldts that were attached to the big mega church back then. Did you have any relation to all the other Boldts in
Yeah,
Saskatoon?
there's which church?
Curtis Boldt at the
Ah,
big Alliance Church.
Curtis Bolt's my cousin. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, he's married to Kim.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when I was a teenager, I went to church and did Bible quizzing.
Uh-huh.
And
Yes.
and they were the cool kids in the provincial things who we'd go to. So I would always
Okay.
hang out with them, and they're now here in Edmonton. Actually, she has
Yeah.
her own
Yeah.
dental office and stuff.
That's right.
But I had to ask because it's a small world, and Boldt seems like such a Saskatoon name in my
Oh
history.
yeah.
So
It's a Mennonite name. We're
it is.
yeah,
Yeah,
Russian Mennonite.
yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I love connections like that. Well,
Mhm.
I really appreciate this. Like I said, Ryan, you taking the time to just talk about your history and your story and the things that you've experienced and learned, which I think benefit everybody. And I really wish you the best with the new album and the tour, and especially with the family.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. Okay, thanks a lot, Ryan.
Okay.
Appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank
you
you.
take care.
Yeah.
Okay,
See ya.
bye bye.
Hey, I'm Alexi. Stick around for post fame with me and my dad.
Was that B-roll gold? Did I miss some B-roll gold by not be recording yet?
No, I'm actually very thankful that you did not hit record.
Okay, and not to share that screen grab that we laughed about ever? Okay.
Yep, no, never.
So let's have a quick chat because I know this isn't a normal time for us to record, and this is in the middle of exam season that you're trying to get through and under the crunch, and you have work shifts and all of these things. So we're adjusting, calling it audible, going on the fly here, but wanted to get the conversation in around episode 13 with Ryan Boldt of the Deep Dark Woods, who, well, I guess I was telling you already this morning, my funniest, just the exchange at the very end of the conversation where I remembered to ask him about whether he's related to other people that I knew with the Boldt last name, and just that actually really weird connection. Anyhow, but that kind of stuff's always funny about how
Small world.
yeah, small world stuff, right? So that's kind of fun.
Yeah.
So we had wanted to talk, and I wanted to ask you a question specific to a couple of things that came up in the podcast. So, and I had a conversation already sort of related with somebody else about this because it stays top of mind ever since I had this conversation with Ryan, which was there was two parts to it. I mean, there's the first version of people's opinion and the effect it has on you and the effect it has on other people. So he had brought up, I had asked him about being sort of boxed into certain genres because in the concept of quote unquote playing very traditional music, and people use that term, and I think they used that term because they didn't know which direction to go. Was it folk? Was it new folk or old folk? Or it had a little country or a little blues or a little bluegrass or a little Celtic even, or whatever. It had at times all the veins. People wouldn't know what to do with it. But then he was experiencing, if a radio DJ or somebody would kind of, whatever they chose, whatever word they chose to use to share about the music and how they understood his music, it created a box. And now he's in that box. And I guess what he expressed was he experienced, was I getting limited in my audience because of somebody's words? And then I just kind of thought bigger about that of like, how sharing your opinion on something is like a portal that you're passing information to everyone else in your world too, but you're
100%.
potentially doing it through a very small box or door or a very wide one for people. So that was kind of the one half of that. Oops, I smacked. There was one half of that. And the other half was just kind of talking about his voice at the end, where he was talking about, because I asked him because of the way it sounded on his new single and relative to some other singers who have kind of had to change their voice as they get a little bit older. And he made a comment about how when he was young, he had a previous girlfriend who told him not to sing like that, not to sing high, right? And so he didn't. right? And then he kind of leaned into that deeper baritone of his, and now he's kind of finding he really likes it. But I just found it so interesting how that one opinion, especially when you're younger, can shape you.
Yeah.
And again, this whole idea of someone speaking one thing into your life can like put you through a brand new door that you wouldn't have gone through unless they said something and it's just their observation or perspective.
For sure.
And I was just kind of wondering, because I know being farther down the line in years, I've got examples and stories, but you're kind of early in this. So all my stories are about things that happened when I was literally the age you are. So I'm wondering if you've experienced things already, you think in your life of, somebody, and it might have just been a random comment or a thing that they just said.
Yeah.
And then you were like, yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think there's more like small repetitive comments that like I couldn't recall, like time and place. But like, things are like just said enough to you, like, or casually just dropped enough that like you start to kind of believe them. And there are like big comments. I think I'm also like very sensitive. So, and like that's something I own for sure.
Yeah, it's good to own that, I think.
But like I think one of like the possible kind of like downsides of being so sensitive, because there are definitely a few, is that like I have to work really hard for like any kind of a comment not to be like taken very personally. I don't know, but I mean, it's interesting because even like in words that you would find like would supposedly have like a positive connotation, like when I was in grade 6, I got put in like that advanced math. Like I got taken out of whatever French class, got put in advanced math, and like I remember my teacher that year was just like, well, you're obviously like a very like gifted girl. Like you're a very smart girl. You're very like ahead of the curve. Like I'm putting you in the advanced reading group, the advanced math group, and like it feels great. But then I found, like, as soon as I entered junior high, like so much of, like, my identity that I started to shape started to be around the fact that, like, I was smart. Like, I was told I was smart, like...
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying, yeah. You started, and that one word, like, you took an identity out of it, right?
100%. And it was really hard for me when, like, especially, like, the word, like, gifted and, like, advanced, like, all of those kind of small comments... It was fine in junior high because I was put in all the advanced groups and I like worked really hard and I got like the highest grades. And then as soon as I started high school, like I remember I got my first like 60 and like had a panic attack. Like it was like earth shattering, and a 60% shouldn't be, like, it doesn't matter. But it was not that, like, I got a bad grade. It was that, like, that grade I felt like was, like, impending on my identity.
It's like, who am I all of a sudden?
Yeah.
Because of that.
Yeah.
But that's the power exactly of this that I'm talking about, right? Yeah, exactly. So someone says a thing and then... and especially when you're young, you don't have this critical thinking or self-examination process built yet. And it just sends you through that door and even sometimes forms your identity. Like I remember, I don't know how or when, I seem to remember getting the message when I was like very small that I had pneumonia when I was really little. I think I can't confirm or deny because it was probably beyond my memory right now. But I do remember somehow being told that I had small lung capacity ever since. Like that's why it was hard for me to breathe underwater at swimming lessons but these weren't things I came up with when I think back now. Like these are things that are told to me, but then I've walked through 50 years of my life thinking I have small lung capacity and I don't actually know if it's true or not, right? Like if someone tells you a thing, or when I was in my first year of college, I mean, up to that point, I was clueless. My mom was buying me all my clothes, right? Like I was not involved in that process at all. And then I don't know what jeans I was wearing. I don't know what brand I was wearing. And it didn't seem to affect my confidence because I was like first year college. I was flirting with girls like crazy. And I remember sitting on a couch with a couple of girls I'd gotten to know that year in first year. And they said to me specifically, they're like, you'd look really good if you'd wear like Levi's 501s. This was like the beginning of the 90s. So Levi's 501s were like the jean to wear.
Yeah.
And I was like, all I heard was like girls say you would look really good if... And I went right down to the discount Army and Navy and got a pair of Levi 501s and never looked back. Do you know what I mean? And like one little word can shape. Anyhow, I think it's also relative to what you were saying about it becoming your identity. And then like, you're like, I'm the smart girl. And then all of a sudden you get into a bigger pool and you're not
Hmm.
the smart girl maybe anymore the same way.
Well, it
And
was like that, and also just not being like the smartest. Like, yeah.
yeah,
And then you're like,
yeah,
well, like, what's true now? Like,
yeah. But don't you think, like I hear this in the music business all the time too, of, someone starts playing and they're playing music and then they're wanting to like go to that next level. And that next level is the first level out of their room where all of their family and parents were like, you sound beautiful. You have the most beautiful voice. And they go right from that to applying for American Idol, right? And then they
yeah,
go in front of a judge and then they're like, you need to work on this. It's, it's not that.
it's not
But
amazing.
yeah, so I think, yeah, I just wondered whether you had, I guess, similar examples, because you're right. Like someone says a thing, or you always think a thing, but then there's the other part of, I guess I'm wondering, you can think about if you have an example in your life of, there's also a case where somebody just says something and you realize you've never been thinking about it that way about yourself. You wouldn't see yourself unless somebody said that thing that way.
Yeah, I think yes. I think in like both kind of positive and negative lights. I think especially like, well, I'll say first of all, like for like a positive light, there definitely has been a couple times where, and it's like kind of usually flattery or like comes out in like a compliment, but where people have said things and I'm just like, oh, like, something that was just part of my habit or like what I thought of like my personality, and then they like coin it a different term. And then yeah, like I think like at work, I remember when I was hosting, like this is like 2 years back, a new server had been hired and she was a little bit like older than like the average age group at my work. And just like her first shift, like I was like, helping like bus all her tables, like just doing everything I could so she like could have like a little bit of an easier shift. And then I always at work like just try to build relationships with everyone, like get people drinks, like ask how they're doing. Like I just try to be like as helpful while I'm there as possible. Like it's what I'm getting paid for. And she had come to me a couple weeks later and she was like, you are like so in tune with like asking people about like their personal lives. And she just went on to just say like how I always like remember what people say and like follow up with them about it and like make them feel like what they're just like saying is actually heard. And
Yeah.
it was like she was saying it like it was this like big thing, and how it was like this like amazing kind of like trait I have. And I was just like, oh, I just like I'm just Snoopy and I like love making people feel like that. You know what I mean?
You downplayed
Um,
it.
well, I was just like, oh, I never thought about that. But it's like that kind of thing. It's like really sweet and it makes you feel really good. Like it makes you feel really lovely. I think it can also be a negative thing. I think especially for women. Like I remember in junior high, like I can like vividly quote things that junior high boys told me about my personality or my appearance that like really like they stick with you until you're mature enough to go through the process of unsticking those kind of things. And I know my friends, like I could literally pick out things that like my friends had said as well, that like were like exact comments from guys. And I think that's where it can be like a negative thing of like I'm just when you're younger you don't really think about that, and then all of a sudden you have like some 13-year-old boy who is like popular and be like, well, you have a really wide face, like you look like a basketball, and to him it's just like whatever, like it's a stupid comment. But then it's like that's like in your head and you're like, oh, I've never thought about myself that way. And then all of a sudden you're worried for the next 5, 6, 7 years that you have like a really wide face and that like maybe you shouldn't put your hair up during basketball practice and like that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, like definitely double-edged sword with those kind of.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole general conversation just about what words can do for people, for sure. But it is definitely the double-edgedness of it. I just think it's also just, there's the wideness of just people can say a thing and it can just
Mhm.
really affect you and it can shut you off from certain directions that you might go in your life as a result, or propel you into them, which can also be
Yeah.
awesome, right? Like there's a point when somebody sees a thing in you and identifies it, and that really sort of brings an energy and a life to that, and you start to maybe pursue
Mhm.
it, right? So, and you need somebody to see that in you, and I think that's huge. And with all these conversations about artists and people in the music industry, I think everybody could probably tell a story of where was it that you felt that real validation, and it probably wasn't from your immediate family or friends, right? It was from
Yeah.
somebody that you respected and was outside of that normal circle who still saw you and saw some potential and took the time to draw that out of you, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
compared to like, you know, and Ryan telling the story of this girlfriend who was like, you shouldn't sing that way. And I sort of briefly had dropped in, like I had heard the story of Bon Iver, that he used to sing in his early days with his early bands, just in his normal register of voice. And then whatever the circumstance was that he showed up and he decided to sing a song in that high falsetto and sing a lady's part or something like that. And I'd have to go back and fact check the story. And then people were like, that actually sounds awesome. And if somebody hadn't said that actually sounds awesome, we might not have Bon Iver.
Yeah.
You know, because that's became his trademark, really. And yeah, it's just interesting the kind of the windows that we can go
I think
push
it's also
ourselves
interesting,
through. Or,
like the like casual, like even like with music, it's like if someone tells you like they like a band, then you just decide like, oh, maybe I should like, you know, give them a chance.
yeah,
Or like if
someone's
someone like
opinion
really
matters.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or like I wonder about like how many bands like I've discovered because someone in my life has like mentioned them, or like how many bands I haven't gone and discovered because someone's like, oh, have you heard of this band? Like, oh, I really don't like them, or like it goes both ways.
Yeah.
But
And how important that is, even your fans' opinion is, or your audience's.
yeah,
And whether they're really actively engaged in being even willing to talk about it for you or whatever. But, you know, voluntarily or involuntarily, people are, by their opinions, passing you through a window, right?
Yeah.
To someone else. And that can be, that's feels very delicate. Just the way you have no control. When you hear someone else talk about it, you realize just how delicate that actually is, right? I guess the last little piece I'll talk about that as I was listening as well, music related. I was listening to another podcast, Song Exploder, which is one of the oldest podcasts that's been around, of, you know, having an artist actually break down how they wrote a song and the process they went through. And it's pretty famous. And I was scanning back, like all the way back to like 2015, 16, 17, the early years.
Yeah.
And I found that they did one with Lindsey Buckingham of Fleetwood Mac about the song Go Your Own Way, which I was like, oh, I want to hear this guy talk about the breakdown of this song for sure. And like, there's all kinds of great stuff in it. But related to this, he talked about once the song was all finished, and he talked about how they came to make it, and some of the choices they made, particularly with the drums. And then it went to radio, and he talked about how he was listening to the famous DJ in his city introduce the song and be like, here's the new song from Fleetwood Mac and blah, blah, blah. And then they played it, and he was like so happy to hear his song on the radio. And then at the end, the DJ was like, yeah, I don't know how I feel about that one. That was it, right? And here's what was funny to me is that Lindsey Buckingham, who kind of famously is like kind of spicy and outspoken, but he said he like called the radio station and asked to talk to the DJ. And so he actually like tried to call him on it, because like it was so like, why would you do that, right? Like you have so much influence by saying that about how, and it obviously worked out very well despite that DJ, but just to call in and actually be the guy as an artist to call him on it, like that was kind of funny to me. But anyhow, that's some of the thoughts that I wanted to chat with you, and I appreciate your experiences and all that kind of stuff. I don't think your face is too round. I think it's just the perfect amount of round, by the way.
Oh, thanks.
Always has been. Now, when you were born, that's another story, and we could share your baby pictures. Goodness.
That was a basketball.
That was a basketball. You came out like a Michelin baby, but look how incredible you've continued to be.
I'm known over 20 years, apparently.
Apparently. Okay, that's it. That's all. Good luck with your exams. I love you so much.
Okay, love you. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.